Dawn breaks over Pine Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, painting the ponderosa pines gold as Dr. Mark Sullivan starts another long day of animal care. The cold autumn air bites at his face as he parks near the clinic and steps out, coffee thermos in hand. Mark's been here 23 years, and while the rhythm of the sanctuary is usually predictable, that morning was anything but. At the front gate sat an unmarked cardboard box snow note. No explanation, just soft whimpering. Adam Chen, Mark's assistant, had been doing the perimeter check when he found it. "Doc, you need to see this." Adam called over the radio, his voice tight. Mark approached the box, knelt, and lifted the flaps. His breath caught. Inside were 5 tiny puppies, no more than 3 weeks old. They were trembling, their fur matted, noses crusted, ribs visible through thin skin. 2 were golden brown, 2 speckled gray, and 1 solid black with a white blaze. On his chest, the runt, who barely moved, they rushed the puppies to the clinic, activating heat pads and 4 drips. The little black one was critical. Adam had already started calling him Boots. "He's crashing," Adam said, his hands trembling as he administered fluids. Mark took over, rubbing the pup's tiny chest, whispering, "Come on, little guy, not today." They fought for every breath those puppies took. For 3 days, Mark, Adam, and the sanctuary staff took shifts around the clock, every 2 hours for formula, every 4 for meds. When they weren't feeding, they were cleaning or keeping the pups warm. Mark barely slept. On the 3rd night, as the clock crawled past 2 a.m., Jake Martinez, the sanctuary's headkeeper, joined Mark in the clinic with 2 mugs of coffee. He nodded toward the Bobcat enclosure on the monitor. "Cinderella's pacing again," Jake said. Mark looked up. The rescued Bobcat had been acting strangely ever since the 2 orphaned bear cubs they'd housed temporarily were transferred to the main forest preserve. She'd seemed restless. "She misses them," Jake said. "She's lonely." Cinderella was unlike any bobcat they'd ever encountered. Found 5 years ago in a collapsed fur farm operation, she'd been barely clinging to life. Mark had bottle-fed her, slept in a cot near her enclosure, helped her recover from mange, malnourishment, and fear. She grew into a powerful, regal creature with golden eyes and surprising gentleness. She once lived with a rescued raccoon named Rocky, who became her constant companion until he passed. Then came the bear cubs, 2 bumbling, messy orphans who Cinderella had watched over like a hawk. She groomed them, played with them, even let them share her food. When they left, she returned to pacing. Jake leaned back in his chair. "You ever think maybe she could help with the puppies?" Mark blinked. "They're domestic dogs, Jake. She doesn't know that, or maybe she doesn't care. Cinderella raised bears. She lived with a raccoon. She's not typical." Adam curled up nearby. Looked over. "She's been standing at the fence every day, watching the clinic. It's like she knows." Mark thought about it for hours. It was against every protocol. Bobcats were wild. Cinderella had never been just a bobcat. She'd never harmed another animal at the sanctuary. More than once, they'd found her chirping at deer through the fence, tail swishing curiously. When Mark had grieved the loss of a wolf pup years ago, she'd sat by the fence line, watching him for hours with a low, steady purr. It started with scent. Mark rubbed soft towels on the puppies, then placed them outside her enclosure. Cinderella sniffed each one intently, chirping low in her throat. "That's a maternal sound," Jake whispered, awe in his voice. Next came visual contact. Mark held up the strongest, a pie. One of the golden ones where she could see but not reach. Cinderella pressed her body to the fence, ears forward, golden eyes fixated. Her tail swished not in agitation, but interest. A week later, they tried physical introduction. The puppies had stabilized all, except for Boots, who remained frail. Out. With safety gear at the ready and hearts pounding, Mark placed the same golden pup, now named Rusty Jest, inside her enclosure. Cinderella moved like Miss Skylant, smooth, deliberate. She sniffed the trembling pup, who gave a weak whine. Then, to everyone's amazement, She gently picked him up by the scruff and carried him to a nest she'd made from hay and old blankets. She began grooming him, rumbling with a deep resonant per dot. Within an hour, all 5 puppies were curled against her, including Boots, whom she tucked close to her warm belly. "She's adopted them," Adam whispered Mark, standing frozen at the fence. Felt tears prick his eyes. "She really has." Days turned 2 weeks, and the miracle unfolded. Cinderella groomed them constantly, carried them when they strayed, even lay perfectly still as they clambered over her, chewing her tail or tumbling over her paws. She had no milk, but when staff brought bottles, she helped hold the pups in place, pressing them gently with her massive paw. Boots especially bonded with her. While the others played, he spent most of his time curled against her side, gazing up at her with wide eyes. She licked his ears with extra attention, carried him more than the others, and guarded his sleep fiercely. Visitors from across the country began arriving. Sanctuary traffic increased. Everyone wanted to see the Bobcat who had adopted puppies. Mark had mixed feelings. "The animals come first," he said. But he knew this was bigger than the sanctuary. This was a story that challenged assumptions about predators, about wildness, about love. In mid-November, the sanctuary received a visit from Elliot Harrison, a wildlife photographer who had followed the story since it first broke. He was there to adopt one of the pups, Rusty. After hours of careful evaluation, Mark approved him. Harrison lived on 40 acres in Montana and had no other pets. He promised weekly updates. The day Rusty left, Cinderella howled. Wasn't angry. It was grieving. She searched her enclosure, sniffing every spot, calling into the wind. The remaining for puppies stayed closer that night, sensing her sorrow. Boots licked her muzzle, curling against her like he did as a newborn. "Maybe we're making a mistake," Adam murmured. Mark clenched his jaw. "We're doing what's right. Cinderella's strong. She adjusts." She did. Slowly the other puppies were adopted in pairs, the gray siblings to a retired ranger in Oregon, the other golden pup to a family whose child had recently lost their Labrador. Boots, the last to go, was chosen by Dr. Alan Morgan, a veterinarian who specialized in special needs animals. Boots had a mild neurological condition. He wobbled when he walked, but his spirit never faltered. "He's perfect," Dr. Morgan said, holding him to his chest. "He reminds me of someone else." With quiet strength, Cinderella knew Boots was leaving that morning. She carried him to Mark and looked straight into his eyes, placing the pup at his feet. It was the first time she ever willingly let go. "Did good," Mark whispered, scratching behind her ear. "You saved them all." After the puppies left, Cinderella grew quiet. She spent more time curled in her corner nest. She still purred when staff came by, still chirped at birds and deer, but something was missing. Then, as snow began falling in early December, another box arrived at the gate. Mark cursed under his breath when he saw it. Inside, 2 tiny puppies, eyes barely open, bellies sunken, shivering. One was solid black, the other orange and white. "Who keeps doing this?" Adam asked. "Doesn't matter," Mark said. "What matters is saving them." They prepped. Clinic. As the puppies were stabilized, sound echoed across the sanctuary, Cinderella's maternal chirp. "She knows," Jake whispered. "She smells them." They didn't place the new puppies in her care immediately. Her biological cubs were due any day. But she wouldn't stop pacing the fence, chirping, tail swishing. When she gave birth to 3 perfect Bobcat cubs, days later, Mark watched on. The security feed, marveling at her poise and care. She was a natural. A week later, the new puppies were brought to the fence. Cinderella pressed her nose through the chain links, sniffed them, then disappeared into her den only to reemerge, carrying one of her cubs, as if to introduce them. They compromised. The puppies remained in the clinic, but were brought to her. For visits, she would groom them through the fence, chirp at them, even bat toys toward them with her paw. Her cubs grew wild and strong, but with a tolerance for small, fragile creatures that startled even the staff. By spring, the Bobcat cubs were climbing, stalking insects, practicing pounces. The puppies were adopted into vetted homes, but not before the staff captured. Remarkable footage. Cinderella teaching her cubs to hunt while the puppies watched her mate. Hunter, a stray tomcat who had taken residence near the fence, chirped at all the young ones, forming his own strange bond with the blended family. Updates came regularly. Boots, now living with Dr. Morgan, had taken to mothering other rescued animals. He grooms everyone, Morgan wrote, even an orphan squirrel kit. It's like he's channeling her.
Ow.
The sanctuary gained recognition. Cinderella became an icon not just for her mothering instincts, but for what she represented. Compassion, across species, boundaries shattered by love. One afternoon, Mark stood at the edge of her enclosure, snow falling gently as Cinderella napped with her 3 cubs nestled close. The 2 new puppies, now healthy, round-bellied, and full of life, chased each other through the clinic playpen nearby, pausing often to stare through the fence at the Bobcat, who had once again opened her heart. Their tiny barks echoed softly, like distant laughters, if they remembered the warmth of her fur. The sound of her purr, Mark watched in silence, the cold forgotten. "You know what amazes me most?" Adam asked, stepping beside him, arms folded against the chill. "It's not that she raised them, it's that she keeps choosing to love, even knowing they'll leave." Mark nodded slowly, eyes never leaving her. "That's real wildness. Not the claws, not the instincts. Heart. She's untamed in the best way." Cinderella stirred, then stretched and padded silently toward the fence. She extended a massive paw through the chain link. The puppies ran to her, yipping with joy, pressing their tiny paws to hers. Her golden eyes met Mark's and held them in a long, slow blink. In that moment, he saw everything: grief, grace, memory, meaning, and a love that crossed boundaries without hesitation. The sanctuary phone rang in the distance. Another rescue, another helpless creature in need. Mark didn't flinch. He smiled gently, eyes still locked with hers. "Bring them in," he said, because if Cinderella had taught them anything, it was this: wild doesn't mean heartless. Sometimes it means loving harder, fiercer, without needing a reason.